Hello and welcome to footballdiscovery.com. My name is Conor and Derek. Today we bring you a podcast about Sam Allardyce, now former England manager Sam Allardyce. We speak to Derek McCarthy, former League of Ireland player with Limerick FC, Waterford United and Galway, scoring over 60 goals along the way. Derek goes on to do a master's degree in sports science and finds himself working under Sam Allardyce from January 2009 when Blackburn Rovers are at the foot of the Premier League table. Derek, of course, goes on to work for Phil Brown at Preston North End and is currently working with the undefeated Limerick FC first team under Martin Russell and also a coach for Tommy Barrett's Limerick FC under 19s, a very successful Limerick FC under 19s. The conversation starts with Derek's first impression of Big Sam before the two men meet.
I think, like all of us, we have that preconceived perception of someone, of what's portrayed in the media, and my impression was pretty much like that of everyone else. So we're a no-nonsense manager, a former no-nonsense player, and quite an intimidating figure, 6'4" or so, big man, and it was going to be quite daunting in that first encounter, and how I was going to feel. And as I said, there was a certain level of trepidation that I felt as I walked through those doors on that first morning, and knowing that I was going to be introduced to his staff and Sam himself.
So you've come in, you're working mainly with the reserve team in the sports science and fitness element of the business. Sam Allardyce, for those that mightn't be aware, first coaching position was player manager with Limerick FC. You're a former Limerick FC player. How did the first introduction go?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I was very, very lucky in that sense because, if you're ever looking for a good icebreaker, that's not a bad one to have. That, yeah, I'm a former Limerick FC player, you're a former Limerick FC manager. Let's have a quick conversation, and that's the way it unfolded, and as I said, it was that lightheartedness in that very first encounter which put me at ease for the rest of my time. The next 2 years at the club was working under Sam, for the fact that he could, remember, obviously, first and foremost, the city and being at the club, which probably isn't that unsurprising, but his detail of knowing some of the players, references to players that he had at the time, even to the detail, remembering the then manager of the club, Mike Curley, who had been on trial with Manchester City, and just reminisced on how close he was to signing for Joe Royal's team at that time. So it was just little stories like that just made me feel at ease, and I was able to mention names of guys that I'd played with or had been involved with the club, and he knew him, and it was just that common ground that just made me feel really comfortable.
So I suppose the first impressions, understandably, because we all can see in the media how people get a name for being something, and you spoke to us about your impression, but when you meet him, he kind of disarms you, has that human connection, remembers people that could you see almost instantly how he's now kind of viewed as being the good man manager that he is in that moment?
Yeah, as I said, the ability to put someone at ease, and I think you rightly used the word disarm you, because you go in there with that level of trepidation and nervousness of being around him. And I think to every member of the staff, you got to remember, at this time there was a lot of staff that were at the football club who were worried about their positions. Not just me, because of the fact that Sam also had the name of having a very big backroom staff at Bolton Wanderers, and there was this Blackburn, for those who maybe don't know the geography of it, Blackburn and Bolton are within about 40 miles of each other, so there was really there was a distinct possibility that a lot of that staff that had worked with him at Bolton could have found their way over to Blackburn Rovers. So his ability to come in and keep everyone, rest assured for everyone that, their jobs were safe, and, once they had given a certain level of quality, that those jobs were safe.
Good. So, I mean, when you look, I suppose the famous one in the media in recent times is David Moyes goes into Manchester United and a whole new staff, more or less. And, of course, in hindsight, he gets criticised massively for that. But, of course, managers tend to do that because they trust those people. How did Sam Allardyce build trust with the staff Did he have connections with some of the staff already? And, presumably he didn't with everybody. So how did he go about kind of building that environment where it starts off with kind of mistrust, if you like, and grows into something else?
Yeah, well, I suppose Sam, in one respect, was lucky that when he came in, a few of the head positions were, for example, the head of sports science was a guy called Mark Howard, who had worked with him at Bolton Wanderers and had travelled to him also with Newcastle. So straight away, he has a familiar face within the camp. Secondly, he's brought in his assistant manager, has come in, Neil MacDonald. So that probably was the one ally he had brought into the camp that wouldn't have been at the club beforehand. And then the head of physio was Dave Fever, who had won the treble with Manchester United in 1999. So straight away, three key areas of the football club were covered. His assistant manager, who he could obviously trust because he brought him in, his head of sports science and fitness, and his head of physio. So I think that helped Sam straight away come in and know that he had good guys in good positions, and those people working under him would have been there based on the judgment of those top guys in those departments.
Good stuff. So how did he manage that staff then? Because I think with your answer, you're kind of telling us what a big operation being a Premier League manager is. We think of man management, we think of the manager and the players, but you've already mentioned three departments.
Yeah, and there's obviously many more. The scouting department, and the performance analysis one, which he would have had a big say on. And look, it's about meetings, it's about communication, and the main thing he would have done is those morning meetings that probably do happen at most clubs. I saw it happens with us at Limerick FC, when we meet up in the morning with Martin Russell, and when I was at Preston North End, we would have had those meetings. So they're not uncommon. It's just the way those meetings unfold and the responsibility that's put on each person's shoulders to contribute in those settings.
Yeah, you spoke about Preston there, and of course you were a first team fitness coach under Phil Brown. I think there's definitely a podcast in that one at another date. So what was Sam's role throughout the week? So obviously you're working with the reserves, but there's that kind of link between the reserves and the first team. Paint a picture for us, what kind of, on the pitch, if you like, on the training ground with the players, what type of a manager was he throughout the week?
Yeah, well, he'd leave a lot of his responsibilities to his coaches, especially early on in the week. Your normal Monday morning would have been your meeting in the morning, going out onto the training pitch, the first half an hour being that, activation and warm up with the head of sports science, Mark Howard, into some form of football exercise with one of the coaches, which were the current MK Dons manager, Carl Robinson, who was in that role at the time, and then go into the main training session with Neil MacDonald, his assistant manager, and Sam would observe. That would have been his main thing on those sessions, especially early on in the week, Monday, Tuesday. Day off on a Wednesday, Thursday, something similar. Just keeping the boys ticking over with whether it's through, football conditioning sessions, just running sessions themselves, or technical sessions maybe in the afternoon with maybe some of the younger players. And it would have been just observing, just making sure his voice wouldn't have been heard a lot, and he would have just seeing what people were doing from a distance. However, late as the week went on and the more focus came onto the game on a Saturday, then you'd really see what Sam was about on the training pitch and organising his team and making sure, I suppose, something that is synonymous with him, and that is his team's been really organised. And you saw that on a maybe a Thursday and a Friday when he was stood in the middle of the pitch, a very vivid image of two footballs either side of him, and dictating his orders to the players and what was expected of him, what he knew of what the opposition were going to bring to the table the following day, how Blackburn Rovers were going to counteract that, and then how we were going to go and win the game ourselves. That not that negative perception maybe of that going out to just draw games. Won a lot of games as well. By having his teams really well organised.
Yeah, so the picture I'm getting here from management to the staff and delegation is a picture of a manager that delegates but ultimately is responsible for the direction and the vision of the organisation. Obviously, Blackburn were down around the bottom of the table at the time. Talk to us about that season and how it panned out in the end.
Yeah, well, as I said, I would have arrived that time, just after, I think it was day after New Year's, and the first game, I think, was against Blythe Spartans, even though Sam would have had a couple of games beforehand. And, the results were rocky. It wasn't an immediate, there was the immediate impact where the first couple of results were good with a couple of wins and draws, and obviously gave people a little bit of confidence that the club, was in good hands and was going in the right direction. But, we went to, up to probably the international break in around March. There was one that season, and Sam decided to take the players away to Gleneagles for a few days R&R, and he got cascaded in the media for it. Kevin Gallagher.
Something similar happened with Queen's Park Rangers, and Harry Redknapp brought them to Dubai, I think, recently. So the idea being, if you're losing, you can't rest.
You can't rest. You stay on the training ground. You put in the hard hours, and not realising that this is a team. This needs to gel when they step out onto that pitch for those 90 minutes and give their all. And as I said, vividly remember, some of the newspaper articles in the local papers, and it was a lot of pressure was on those guys, because they'd been given that opportunity to go and have a certain level of, relaxation above in Scotland. And when they came back, they got a 2-1 result against Tottenham. They were at home that weekend, and it was Robbie Keane actually that scored, to put Tottenham 1-0 up, and Blackburn came back and won the game 2-1. So it was, a certain level of being justified, that he'd taken the players away from this. But that was with 8 games to go, and that was a bold move for him to do, because, as I said, a lot of people would have reverted back to what was expected of you. Long hours on the training ground, and already probably deflated and demoralised group of guys were going to have to spend even more time on the training ground. This was take them out of that environment, build up their egos again, and hopefully with 8 matches to go, get the results they did. And it did. They ended up finishing 15th that year, and from being in a position of bottom of the table at Christmas to 15th, by May, it's a remarkable achievement.
Yeah, so he comes in, changed the short-term fortunes of the club, makes big decisions like the one you spoke about in Gleneagles, gets them to stay up. Following season is his first full season, and of course you think he gets to recruit now himself, he gets to make this team his own. Give us an idea of kind of the role of Sam Allardyce at the club at that time when he came to getting people into the club.
Okay, so we knew the players he had, because he'd had that length of time, to assess who he wanted to keep and maybe who he didn't want to keep. And sometimes in football that's not as clear cut, because sometimes trying to get guys out the door and trying to get guys in can be quite difficult. But one of the things that Sam does want is a fit team, fit players and ones that can put in a shift, not luxury players, not ones that think that, okay, just get me on the ball. There is certainly about his teams that had that level of fitness. And that would have been reflected then in his recruitment. The scouting side of things, I would have seen a little less so, because those scouts that are on the ground are out in Europe watching games, they're going to games in England, wouldn't have seen him at the training ground as much. But what we did see was a type of player. A couple of unknowns came into us with regards to Stephen Nzonzi, Atletico, he's at now, is it? Or
Stephen Nzonzi, Sevilla in Spain, so would have played in the Europa League final last year. Yeah.
So a player like that came into us, Gael Givi came in, so slightly unknowns, even though they would have had a certain level of reputation in France, and would have come in for relatively small money. Other side of it then, a young player from Croatia, Niko Kalinic, who's now at Fiorentina, he came into the squad. So there was that kind of blending of a little bit of experience, maybe of a Gael Givi, that would come in on the defensive side of things, a bit of use up front in Kalinic, a bit of use in Stephen Nzonzi. So he was willing to take a gamble on maybe some of those younger players to come in and impact the squad with a certain level of energy that maybe the older players at the time at Tugai or maybe wasn't given.
So he's getting that balance of youth and experience, and obviously we've all probably seen the research there where successful teams tend to have an average age of 27 or above. So he's obviously a results oriented manager. Most that stay in a job are. How did he manage? You mentioned a lot of nationalities there, and when you think of his Bolton team, certainly towards the latter years when he was getting in kind of older kind of free agents, you think of kind of United Nations. I think Blackburn was similar at the time. Was Michel Salgado was there as well. How did you manage that kind of day to day, that kind of different cultures, different lingos going on in and around the place?
Yeah, well, English, would have been the common tongue and would have been the expected common tongue within training from the players, from the out on the training pitch, but sometimes that spills over, which is expected to a certain extent when you have a lot of French players or French speaking. Some of the African lads would have been fluent in French as well. You would have had an Aussie in Brett Emerton and Ryan Nelson. They would have had quite British cultures or mentality, the Irish and those would have had a certain level of a click, even though I think that within the group and within the squad it always looked quite harmonious and everyone seemed to get on okay, but there was definitely that click, and that was probably exaggerated even more when we were when you sit down to eat. You sit down to eat with people that you know. So if you could imagine the eating area in Blackburn Rovers, where it's just table after table in long rows. And I think it was the chef, actually. We had an absolutely fabulous chef. The food he cooked was magnificent. And he came up with the idea that the tables maybe should be split. Maybe if we had tables where only 4 people could sit. And that would be a way of maybe helping to break some of these cliques. And it definitely had an effect, even to the point where the staff had a big round table where we all sat. And then suddenly that table gets removed, and all of a sudden you have a staff member sitting down with maybe a reserve player or one of the senior players, and it definitely helped break down some of those cliques that can occur in club. And again, going back to staff, this was a manager where a member of the staff had come to him with an idea, and it was embraced and proved successful.
Yeah, and I think we spoke earlier about perceptions, and I suppose one of the things we're seeing here, and what's been very revealing with your answers, is that the reality is very, very different to the perception a lot of the time. Speak to me about Michel Salgado, who obviously has been playing in those Galacticos teams in Real Madrid. Now he's in Blackburn. What was he like?
Brilliant, absolutely top class. Came with an absolute bundle of energy of wanting to do well, wanting to achieve. It's not too difficult at times to see why these guys get to the top, because it shows. It's reflected in what they do, the way they eat, the way they come into the training ground, the way they treat other people, the way when they're out on the training pitch, how from the warm-up to a passing drill into some team shape to maybe the more boring side of it, they do to the best of their ability. And Michel was that. He was absolutely fabulous to listen to. Always generous in his time, whether it was me asking him questions about what they did with warm-ups and that with Real Madrid, to sitting around on one occasion on his birthday where he put on a full Spanish day for the staff, and with Spanish food, Spanish alcohol, Spanish wine and cider, and then gave us his time for probably the bones of 3 or 4 hours, where Sam just asked him questions with maybe 20, 30, everyone from the groundsman was sitting in on this, to the bootman, to, as I said, people like myself, and absolutely thoroughly engrossed in these stories, and as I said, at the time he had spent at obviously a massive club like Real Madrid.
Brilliant. I suppose Salgado's there at a time when his career's coming to an end, and subsequently actually came over here to Ireland to do some of his coaching badges. A player perhaps at the beginning of his career at that time was Phil Jones.
Yeah, Phil now would have come up, would have been a guy I spent an awful lot of time with, because he'd come up from the youth team up into the reserves, and immediately you knew that this kid was another one that wanted to learn, wanted to get better, and had this bit about him that you knew there was something in him. To say that I saw that he was going to go on and play for Manchester United, that'd be a lie, because I don't think at any age at that age it's very difficult to predict to the heights they can go. All you know is that are good trainers, and we had a lot of them. We had a lot of really good trainers. Ian Brunskill was the reserve team manager at the time, and he had a really nice group of players together, and many of them I thought would have had better careers than they did. But fair play to Phil, he got his opportunity in the first team, and he just went from strength to strength.
What was his key attribute at that time? Because you see him at Man United, and I suppose he doesn't stand out as being a highly technical player. Yes, he's played a lot of times for Manchester United. He's won the Premier League. What was standing out about him back then, even though you might not have seen a Man United player in him?
Yeah, well, I suppose it was that. I suppose maybe Sam saw something in him where it was that bit of no nonsense. We would be playing a reserve team game on a rainy night in Accrington, or Altrincham, I should say, and the ball would go down the wing, and he put in Rosetta. He wasn't going to take a risk. He wasn't going to put the ball in doubt, and when it was there to be played, he'd go and play it. And if there was a header to be won or a tackle to be won at a certain level, a braveness to be shown, he did that. And I think it was that type of player that Sam looked at and said, yeah, I think I can trust this kid to go in and play against Chelsea in that League Cup game. I think it was a League Cup game he got his debut and was absolutely magnificent.
So there was a bit of discipline about him, despite obviously his physical attributes are humongous, but it's maybe that discipline to just kind of go out and do your job.
Yeah, and to be honest, that was one question I actually did ask Sam on a Christmas Christmas staff party and asked him for why did he stand out from the group of reserves? Because as I said, we had a lot of really good reserve lads and guys that, as I said, maybe when technically we get better, and not to question his judgment, but certainly to just out of pure intriguement of saying why Phil, and it was that was the reason. It was trust, and I think it's a message a lot of young players should remember, that it's. And I saw Jose Mourinho said this last year. People say about managers trusting players. Manager putting his trust in the player, but the player has to make sure the manager can have trust in him, and that's what Sam had with Phil. If he asked him to run around after Frank Lampard for 90 minutes and never leave him out of his sight, that's what Phil would have done, and that was an important attribute that obviously Sam saw in Phil.
Okay, talk to me about playing style. So again, we go back to perceptions and then actual realities. My own view, when I watched his Bolton team play, as I mentioned earlier, especially towards the latter years, that in the attacking half of the pitch, I mean, JJ Kocha, you'd pay to watch him, you'd Yorkaev, you'd all these players, Fernando Riero, Anelka was there. So, certainly there's definitely, you look at some of his teams and they can be direct, but was it just a label? What's your view having worked with him?
Yeah, so it certainly was a label because as you said, you just listed out a host of players there that I don't think any manager could tell him that I want you to be a long ball football team. I asked again, as I said, at opportunities. Those were burning questions that I had as a lover of football. And when you're in that situation, you think, I got an opportunity to ask Sam that question. I did, and he said that it basically was again based around some really positive results that Bolton team got against some of the top teams. Those top managers wanting to deflect it, poorly little Bolton had managed to get a result. Well, let's give them a name. Let's say that they're, a long ball football team. Let's try and discredit them because, that top four, we're the footballing teams. Don't have it said that Bolton played football. So I think there was a lot of that in that team, and you would be surprised once you get that media to get a message out there in the public. And as I said, some of those really top respected managers do that really well, where they maybe deflect a little bit from their own negativity. And Sam, I think, hopefully history will retell that story a little bit better than his time at Bolton. However, that said, you come to Blackburn and maybe he just felt those players at that time didn't maybe have that quality that he needed to go and play the type of football that Bolton played that got into Europe. He felt that they needed to be a little bit more direct. And we had players to do that, with regards to, the physical attributes of a Roy Nelson and a Chrissy Samba, to up front where you had, a player like Jason Roberts, who would cause any defence problems with his physical attributes and scoring abilities. So it made sense that you will always try and work towards the best attributes of your players and get them to play in a way that will get your performance. And as you said, he's a winning manager. He gets results. He's got results everywhere he's went.
So talk to me about, I suppose it's kind of well documented that his time again in Bolton, he was one of the first to kind of bring in a pro zone, which at the time nobody really knew what it was. How did he use, tools like that when he was with Blackburn?
Yeah, I think once for all, I suppose, all of us as individuals and particularly athletes and elite athletes, giving them some form of quantifiable expression of what's expected of them helps them have a goal to what they need is to do on the pitch. And Prozone was able to offer us that with giving us a breakdown of how many runs you had, how many high intensity sprints, total distance covered, all those different metrics that they give. But added into that then, obviously the technical side of it, how many times you kept the ball, your touches on the ball, forward passes, sideways passes, backward passes, and all that stuff then became really important. And a lot of pressure was put on Paul Brand, who was the performance analysis coach, who's now at Manchester United, to come up with really easy to read breakdown of the data that Sam was able to use and for the players to understand and the importance of running over 2,000 metres of high intensity running in a football game and what that would mean for the team and what happens. What pros don't give you is an average and what every other team is doing. So you can see how you rank when you do those certain metrics. So if you keep the ball more, if you concede more possession in your own half, or certain distances that you travel, there is certain markers that can tell us what will cause more successful teams. And it probably isn't rocket science to say that if I run more and run harder and sprint harder, I'm going to win the game. But to be able to give the players that figure, it certainly helped them to have a goal and something that they needed to strive for in each game.
Yeah, so again, I'm just going to stick on playing style for a minute. You think in recent years, you think about Ireland and Trapattoni getting kind of lambasted for the style of play. There's different viewpoints from fans, I suppose, like the two of us looking at the pitch, saying, is the manager asking them not to play? Are they allowed to play out from the goalkeeper? What are the parameters between manager and player? So, like we spoke about kind of the misconceptions with Sam's Bolton's team, your time with him in Blackburn, were there strong do's and don'ts or what were the parameters?
Yeah, I do think that there probably was a bit more of that style of a tighter parameter than maybe, well, we won't get to see that now, but maybe at England those parameters would have been a little bit wider and the expression of a player like Wayne Rooney would have been much more, encouraged than maybe what you would have got at Blackburn Rovers. But that said, there was certainly that part of it where no nonsense in your own back four, no nonsense of in your own half. Mm-hmm. Don't put the ball at risk, and I suppose some people might cite that as being a certain level of percentage football. But you got to realise that when you're playing the high intensity football of in the Premier League, and each week each game is as tough as the last, and maybe even tougher, that it's important that these players don't get caught in possession of the ball and put the ball at risk in an area that doesn't allow any of his teammates recover and help him out. So maybe a ball going into David Dunn's feet is okay because we know David Dunn can look after him, maybe create something. So we're not going to kick it over his head, obviously. Or if the ball goes wide to a Pedersen, we know it's going to go in the box or to a David Hoylett. You've got when it went into those kids' feet or those players' feet, we knew that they were going to go and try and do something. There was no, restrictions on what their individual license was allowed to do. But maybe in the back four, the likes of, as I said, a Lars Jakobsen, Ryan Nelson, maybe there was that, Chrissy Samba, maybe get the ball into the channel, maybe get the ball wide a little bit quicker.
So play to your strengths.
Play to your strengths. And you know what, that's, as I said, that isn't rocket science either.
A couple of more questions for you. There was Irish players there at the time. I'm going to just specifically, because there's quite a few, go into two that aren't playing anymore. Keith Andrews, what was he like in your time in Blackburn? And maybe speak a little bit about what he's doing now and what type of a person he is.
Yeah, as you said, there was a lot of Irish there, and that definitely helped personally with settling into the area. With the connection that the club has with the DDSL. But people like Keith, magnificent, so good to us. Stephen Reid, excellent. And people like Keith, who had been at MK Dons, am I right saying, went from League One to the Premier League, and he done extremely well. And for a guy, as I say, got maybe the latter end of his career, got the rewards that maybe if he'd got a little bit earlier, could have had an even more successful career. But it would have been there in around the time we failed to qualify for the Euros, when that infamous Henry handball, and there was that level of speaking as a fan to Keith and seeing how much emotion and how distraught they were at what happened on that night. It kind of gave you that humanised what footballers are about. We see the money, we see maybe the behaviour of some of them, but at the end of the day, they put on the Irish shirt, the green of the Irish jersey, and want to go out and do their best, and they hurt as much as we hurt, and there was certain level of comforting for me for that. Maybe the way Trapattoni treated Stephen Reid, and how much he was disappointed by that. They were things that I really liked him, because that's what you want them to be. When you meet them, you want them to be nice guys. You want them to want to play for Ireland. You want them to give their all and care about it. And that was shown. And as I said, they were great guys and brilliant with me.
See, with those two guys, you mentioned Keith Andrews and Stephen Reid. They're both kind of in around the media now at the moment. They've also done some coaching. I know that Andrews was at MK Dons, and I think Stephen Reid, if I'm not mistaken,
I think he's at Reading now.
He's at Reading, yeah, so. He is. He's there with Yapstam at the moment, I think, isn't he?
Yeah.
So, where do you see those guys going if they do go into that kind of coaching / management? Have those guys got kind of the personality for that kind of game, do you think?
Well, definitely the one thing I saw about that group of players, we spoke earlier about cliques, but you would have had that group of a David Dunn and a Stephen Reid and a Keith Andrews, a Jason Roberts, sitting around a lunch table talking football. These guys loved the game. They discussed it. They discussed it tactically, discussed technically. You knew that there was people. This was a group of guys that wanted to further their careers and in football and to stay in the game. And I think the guys, said Stephen and Keith, I think when they're speaking on the TV and they're doing their media work, you can sense, obviously, first and foremost, they're very good with the media side, but you understand their understanding, of the game, and they are students of the game, and it's probably something that I might do in a few weeks' time regarding being a student of the game. That's the most important thing you've got to be, because you're always learning, and just because these guys have played 12, 15 years of professional football, you see and you listen to them that these guys are students, and they want to get better. And as I said, I saw that during my time there, that these guys were going to have a career in the game.
Very good. Alan Judge was at the club at the time, I suppose, a lot younger back then, was trying to break on the scene. Of course, Alan Judge, unlucky last season through injury, maybe not to break into the Irish squad, because he was doing excellent with Brentford. What were your views of him at the time, in terms of, obviously his career has been a little bit different. He's really probably only hopped on the scene in the last 18 months. Was there promise there? Yeah,
look, and again, as I said earlier, that reserve team that was there had a lot of exciting young players with him. Gavin Gunning, Aaron Dorn, Alan Judge. They were all guys that the club were very excited about, and were hoping to keep him at the club and hoping for them to kick on. But such is the way in Premier League football and the quality of players that come in. Sometimes these guys need to go out and learn their trade. And at the time, Alan would come in and he would train for a couple of months with the first team, and then go out on loan and gain his experience. And as I said, I think, again, we're speaking about nice guys. When I saw him break into the Irish international squad last year, and then obviously the disappointment of the injury, a really, really nice guy, and put me up one night as well. I stayed at his house one night, and as I said, the generosity from him, those guys deserve to be rewarded in the game, because they work really, really hard, and maybe sometimes it isn't shown or it isn't respected, maybe in the media, or maybe as supporters or people looking in, that we think that and one guy's Elaj Juff represents the entire group, or what we see in the media represents what all the rest of the players. The reality is 99% of them are top class guys. it's the 1% that seems to give a bad name because, and when I'm saying 1%, that's even incorrect because when I was at Blackburn, 100% of the lads were top lads. There wasn't any guy. They were all good. And that probably again would have been reflected in Sam because, if you weren't the top guy in the group, you wouldn't have lasted. I know people probably will say, well, you mentioned Ella's Juf, who Sam brought. Ella's Juf was really good within the group, the laundry lady, to the chef, to me and what I did in my role at the club, never at once had a problem with him, So, as I said, maybe the pantomime villain in the media and some of the stuff he says about, Stephen Gerrard and Jimmy Carragher, I don't know. I can't say too much about that, but from a personal level, really good guy.
I'm going to finish with two maybe tricky questions or personal questions, but Alan Judge goes on and, through working hard in his career, even though it doesn't happen for him, we say at Blackburn, even though he did eventually break into the team, goes on now and it looks, if he recovers properly from injury, like he's going to have a really, really good career. Then you've got, the Keith Tracy's, who I believe was there at the time, and we see him back in the League of Ireland now, and I'll say, because I'm in a position to not as a fitness coach, probably wasn't the fittest when he came back. What are the things for young players to look out for in terms of, Alan's going in his direction, Keith still a professional footballer and still has a lot of ability. How do you make sure that you go on the up despite the knockbacks?
I think the most important part of it was, because it's funny you mentioned about Keith's fitness. Keith was an elite athlete. That's what we classed him at Blackburn Rovers. You couldn't put a test in front of Keith without him being the best at it. He was very, very quick. Very, very, over speed endurance, excellent. Over aerobic endurance, excellent. But the problem was that all the hard work that he had done to maybe get to that level, maybe didn't continue on the way it had done. Alan, maybe on the other side, who, yes, would have been fit and quick, was always having to work hard to do that because of his size. He wasn't the tallest of players. So he always had that little bit where he needed to constantly prove himself, and people were going, Alan would be a great player if Alan, and there was that little doubt over him. So he was constantly having to prove himself. And I think it was that, mindset that he had in the willingness to keep on pushing himself and working hard is why that now, maybe at 26, 27 years of age, he's got, the rewards, or hopefully he will go on even better and get even more rewards from the game. Whereas maybe Keith, who had achieved an awful lot at a very young age, maybe felt that the hard work had been done, when the reality was, there was a lot done, and a lot more to be done after that. And that would be the key message to any kid or coach that's listening to that. Be careful of the message that you're giving to your kid about how great they are, Great.
Because to put some context to it, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, Keith Tracy was probably playing in a decent Burnley team, doing really, really well.
Yeah, had him at Preston North End as well.
Yeah.
And again, high hopes.
Alan Judge at the time wasn't playing,
no.
Right? First team football. Anyway.
Wasn't. Well, he would have. I think he would have been getting games maybe lower down the league. We would have been talking, when you're talking about Keith, it's Championship. Where he would have been at. Maybe a little bit of League One for the time, with Preston. But no, Keith was playing at a very high level. And a lot of people were showing a lot of faith in him. And, you never know. Keith's still very young as well. He's still got an opportunity to impact on football here in Ireland. And I love if he did, because, I know I keep saying this, really nice guy, an exceptional talent, has an Irish cap, I think, he could still resurrect his career. It's not too late.
Final question, probably the toughest one. From your time with Sam Allardyce and seeing the media reports that we're looking at the moment, will he bounce back?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think what happened this week has been, just really, really disappointed of the way it's done and what has happened. But I'm in no doubt that this man is going to want to go and prove himself again. He was doing a magnificent job at Sunderland before he went to England. And I think if there's any chairman out there and they're thinking that they need a man to come in and revolutionise a club and put them on a right, steady road to, whether if they're in a lower position or if they're a mid-table position, that they're going to be in a better position with Sam Allardyce being manager.
Okay, Derek, thanks very much for your insight.
Thank you, Conor.
For those of you that listened, thank you very much for stopping by. Please get yourself along to footballdiscovery.com. Whether you like to read a blog here or there, listen to a podcast, whether you're a coach that likes to get session plans, we hope that footballdiscovery.com is your home for those things. Thank you.